Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yashvendra Singh, Executive Editor of ETCIO and ETCISO, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion on cybersecurity, staying away from the danger zone. Cybersecurity over the last 1 year has been a critical aspect across industries where a single error could lead to disastrous consequences, in some cases, financial loss too. From remote services to work from home, hackers have been trying hard to penetrate the walls of BFSI enterprises. Cybersecurity leaders, meanwhile, are trying their best to prevent them from doing so. In this panel today, we have with us top BFSI CISOs who will share their perspectives on how the cybersecurity landscape has changed in the last 1 year and what they are doing to keep the unknown at a distance. Please join me in welcoming our panelists of the day in alphabetical order: Mr. Biju K, Head Operational Risk and CISO Federal Bank; Mr. Shibu K. Thomas, Joint GM and CISO South Indian Bank; and Mr. Wade Prakash, Senior Business Development Manager, Banking, India and SAARC, Thales Group. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me set the ball rolling with Mr. Biju. Biju, sir, how has the cybersecurity landscape changed in the last 1 year? How have the threats changed in terms of frequency, types, etc.? Because, according to reports, COVID-19 related cyber attacks incidents increased by as much as 240% in the third quarter and by 114% in the fourth quarter. How do you see the landscape changing because of the pandemic in the last 1 year?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, ED, for the opportunity. So, Yashvendra, as you rightly mentioned, the attacks, particularly the cyber attacks, is increasing rapidly. And in the last 1 year, since the COVID pandemic broke out, we are seeing huge increase in some specific kind of attacks like phishing, vishing, ransomware attacks like that. And moreover, as we all know, the scenario where we work, where the devices are connected, all those things have changed a lot. So it's simply saying, or the most simple way we can say, perimeter has vanished. Now there is no perimeter. Now from anywhere in the world, from any device, people can connect to the organization's network. So in that way, we have to accept the fact that many of our existing controls, we need to relook and ensure that appropriate alternate controls or compensating controls are put in place to protect the organization from attacks. So particularly during the last 12 months, now more than 12 months, what we are seeing is that a huge increase in the social engineering kind of attacks, and mainly targeting at compromising the AD credentials, which are mainly used for authenticating users like that. So there we need to put up a lot of effort in ensuring that no controls are there and no compromises are happening. So there's a huge shift in that one.
Absolutely. Great inputs there, Biju sir. Let me come to Mr. Shibu now. Shibu sir, like Biju sir just said, obviously a lot of workforce is working from home, and that actually changes the rules of the game. And I believe that there is heightened network security risk because we now have consumer grade equipment at the other end. I mean, if you can call it the other end of the perimeter where the employees are working. So how do you see all this impacting cybersecurity?
First of all, let me thank Economic Times and Yash also for this opportunity. Continuing on the same thread which Mr. Biju was speaking about, the key point here, everything has changed perimeter. I mean, we were seeing a small shift before COVID in terms of organizations moving to cloud, especially banks. If you see, we were slightly reluctant to move to cloud earlier. There was a slight shift to cloud, but which got escalated due to COVID, I would say. So when the perimeter is now going out of your data center and into cloud and into somebody else's home, etc., what happens is basically the visibility reduces. And then a lot of attacks which we see possibly could be due to that in the sense that the controls which we had earlier may not be sufficient now. For example, if you take about the landscape change, the attack landscape change, 2019 you had ransomware. It's plain and simple. Now 2020 onwards, what we saw was ransomware plus data leak. That is double extortion, where ransomware is there. On top of that, the hackers threaten to expose your data also. They extract the data and say that, threaten you with, in case you do not pay the ransom, your data will be exposed or it will be leaked out. So organizations are literally caught in a jam if they are. So the the list of risk which we see is, of course, the ransomware in the double extortion style it has come out. It is increasingly being seen. Then we had the famous supply chain compromise, where supply chains are being compromised, vendors are being compromised. Through them, the customers are accessed, taken out. And then, as Biju sir was mentioning, phishing and business email compromise attacks, remote, and then specifically targeting collaboration and remote access tools, so using vulnerabilities there to access the organization, and of course social engineering. This is a summary of the risk which we are now seeing across that past this COVID period, I would say. And this is the landscape change which we have seen. And to handle this, naturally, a different approach is just normal, ordinary controls may not be sufficient. You need to go to a different set of maybe approach, like look at the concept where you trust nothing but verify everything. That sort of approaches would be, I'm just summarizing, but that sort of approach would be definitely required to, that would be the way forward. That's what I believe. It's a must. I don't think we have much options left out, I would say.
Absolutely. Sure, sir. Sure. Great. Coming to Ved now. Ved, I'm sure you must be interacting with lots of CISOs, in India and SAARC as you take care of these two geographies. What do you hear from them? What's the feedback that they give you in terms of the changing threat landscape?
Sure. Thanks, Yashvendra, for giving me the opportunity to share my views as well. And I do second the thought process shared with Biju and Shibu on the current threat landscape, the way it is changing with the digitization and more voluminous growth of data that's happening. The key focus, as the Shibu rightly called it out, is that a lot of previous direction was primarily on securing the perimeter. But now, as the shift is moving from perimeter towards the data, which is being spread and being shared across everywhere, the data-centric approach is predominantly the need of the hour to contain the emerging cyber threats or attacks, where the nature is predominantly to get the data out and either trade with that data or bring any kind of reputational damage with the data, which in terms of data breaches we are hearing, or with the current any kind of ransomware or phishing. The whole objective has become to take your data out, gain as much information as we can about your organization's sensitive data. So I am forcing a lot of focus coming towards a data-centric approach, where now the imminent requirement is to discover and address how do we first identify which data is sensitive, which data is not that sensitive. This becomes the number one importance. When you are done with this part, how do we classify whether this data falls under confidential, sensitive, or public? And once you are also able to address these various data types in your organization, then you need to jump on bringing the right technological controls that act on the data. So this is where we have a new controls which are being reinforced, where technologies like encryption, which acts as the last line of defense on the data itself, where in spite of all the breaches that happen, at least it will keep the data safe in your control and will render it useless if it goes outside to any unauthorized person. And from there, other similar forms like tokenization, or we keep hearing about data masking, or if we are moving the workload in cloud, how do we gain access of those control for your sensitive data moving on cloud using some new technology controls like bring your own keys, which helps you to get the control of the encryption keys in your possession rather than leaving it with the cloud provider. Or there is very highly sensitive data and you want to take the complete encryption process itself on the cloud, which is called bring your own encryption. So I am forcing a lot of organizations looking into these aspects of a data protection approach that they are considering. And they are also trying to move away from the silo-based approach which used to exist earlier in securing the specific type of data for a specific type of environment with a single purpose technology which used to be deployed in various point of time. Now they're looking at a kind of a scalable platform-based solution which has the capability to include or grow as the business requirement changes with respect to data security. And they need not come back and reinvest, at least from the data security perspective, or at least from the new compliance or the new regulatory mandates that are coming to secure around the data. So this is something which they foresee to have a modular approach in terms of defining a consistent or a centralized mechanism in place across the organization that can cater the need for securing the data right from the time it is created, being stored, being shared across within the organization or outside the organization.
Sure.
So I think it is about securing the life cycle of the data to be in a nutshell, which I would like to share it across.
Great. Thanks a ton for that very comprehensive answer, Ved. Coming back to Biju now. Biju, employees may be using unauthorized personal accounts and applications, such as email accounts and other unauthorized applications, for all you may know, because they don't come to the office now. So that's all that is beyond control. How do you prevent data loss from such activities, under such some circumstances?
Coming specifically to that question, Yash, 100% prevention of shadow IT, that may not be possible. It's a fact that all of us have to accept. So while we say that there will be some amount of shadow IT, so we have to take adequate steps to ensure that the sensitivity or confidentiality of the data is maintained. That is particularly based depending upon the configuration of the assets. So what we can do is that we in this particular environment where most of the people do work from home, so we need to ensure the sanity of the endpoint device from which the users are connecting, particularly depending upon the kind of access we are providing. So in this kind of situation, it may not be prudent to give the same kind of access to every user. So we need to ensure that at the first level, the users are given the right kind of privileges, that is the minimum privileges. So basically, we need to have a mapping of the roles allocated and map the access provided. That is basically the role-based access controls we need to put in place. And then depending upon the kind of roles, that is those who have access to the kind of sensitive or confidential information, we need to ensure that adequate controls are there at the endpoints. So that can be by way of institutions on devices, or where the kind of VDI kind of controls where we can put a minimum baseline controls for the endpoint which is connected, even if it is the employee-owned devices. It needs to meet some amount of security criteria, that is at least the latest antivirus and latest patches, supported OS, those kind of minimum requirement every institution must ensure. And also now in the solutions like VPN, VDI, controls are available so that data downloading or further forwarding we can control to a reasonable extent. So it has to be a balancing between the endpoint security, the kind of rights provided to the users, etc., along with the monitoring. So then also there are other kind of controls like DLP kind of tools which we need to make available at the endpoints, particularly when people connect from home. So either all the connections should be secured through a web proxy kind of tool, or we need to ensure that data leakage prevention kind of tools are available at all endpoints. So it should be a combination of processes and controls that should be deployed to ensure that data is available only on a need basis and it is not misused.
Sure. So, Mr. Shibu, do you agree with Biju there? A combination of solutions and controls and processes.
Yes.
What's your approach here? Yeah.
Yes, very true. I think he has really, touched a very, very critical point here. In fact, you have raised a very valid point. Or the reason is shadow IT. I think probably it was always there somewhere, but I think what has happened is part of this new, normal or this new remote working, etc. The threat and from this shadow IT has increased, basically, I would say, because earlier you used to work from your own premises, your data center possibly was there under your control. So the chances of shadow IT were very minimal. Since you had a lot of controls around it, you would not allow anybody to install their own applications, use their email ID, etc. Personal emails, all those things you had control. Now, what has happened is when you started working from home, there are new requests came, new. There were challenges around some access somewhere, some requirement came up. I had to send this mail to my personal ID. I could not access that, etc., etc. So many things came up. So then, what do we do about it? In fact, a quick look before I go to the answer. I mean, I wanted to also have a quick look at the risk. See that when you have a shadow IT, you don't have appropriate cybersecurity controls available. You do not have a control on the data loss, potential data loss. You do not know who is accessing the data, and the compliance itself is under question. In the sense, these are very brief listing of the risk involved. Now, what do you do about it? So now, to ensure that the data, as Ved was mentioning earlier, data is the heart of all these things. I mean, we need to ensure that the data-centric approach, or that the data is protected at any cost. And in that sense, starting from the laptop which that employee is using, you need to build controls from there itself in terms of access to internet and access to the corporate application or the corporate systems itself through a combination of VPN, VDA, so that the whole access is encrypted, and plus ensuring that whatever device they use to access the corporate applications or systems are appropriately protected with, when I say protected, I mean they have the up-to-date protection in terms of whether it is antivirus or patches or whatever it is, the latest versions which are not vulnerable, I would say. The latest which are at that point in time bug free, at least free from known bugs. That sort of applications and access should be through those mechanisms. So remote access should be definitely one key point here. The controlled remote access, and of course, as I mentioned earlier in the previous discussion also, see here the importance of zero trust comes into picture here, because when you talk about trust nothing, verify everything, and then there's no question of whether it is, even if it is coming from a authorized remote access, authorized employee accessing an authorized system, still you verify, you don't trust him. Whether he's accessing your network, whatever it is, ensure that sufficient controls and use appropriate controls and software to ensure that this is coming. You can use a whole pile of things. I mean, in terms of right from starting from geotagging, geolocation to, I mean, the user-based behavior anomaly. You can ensure a baseline for the user behavior. Tools are available for that. So a combination of many such things, microsegment your network. Part of zero trust, you build layers of controls which would prevent this data from unauthorized access to data, and data not going out or data loss being prevented. This is basically from the, I mean, not only just data loss. Basically, you ensure the data is not, you're not having a breach itself through lax or controls. And of course, you can also do as Biju mentioned rightly, monitoring is very critical here. And for helping the monitoring, you need very strong technical asset management. You simply cannot allow assets to be added and removed as and when it is, without control, I would say. Right. So every asset, each and every asset in your system, whether it should be accounted for, system you can use private tools for that. Once assets are accounted for, and you practice application whitelisting, the threat of a shadow IT becomes much less, because it is visible to you. What is accessing your system is visible to you. Once you have visibility, you can build controls around it. That's how I think we need to address this.
Okay,
that's from my side.
Sure, right. Sure, great. So with the CISOs and CIOs have been battling shadow IT for long, but now it has gained completely different proportions with a lot of people working from home. What's the best way to counter it?
Absolutely. In fact, I will again second the thought process which Shibu just called it out. And I think the way currently the organizations are also looking in terms of the value at risk when you were talking about a data security control built across the enterprise. And that becomes a very critical component in terms of helping you to roll out a protection mechanism across your organization. And if you see, I would like to say, no matter whatever kind of controls you build in to secure your perimeter, in today's scenario, breaches are inevitable. You cannot say that you will never get breached. So our discussions have typically now started saying that assume we get breached, how do we contain the data breach? And that is where I think, again, a very different approach altogether has come in, which is what I call is a data-centric approach, where, we are talking on trying to get started with protection that is applied on data, independent of the data's location. So, and in order to make it effective, all this control should happen in an automatic fashion, where, sensitive information is identified as soon as it enters your IT ecosystem, and then it gets secured with a policy-based protection, that lasts throughout the data lifecycle. So as each organization would require a unique solution, because one tailored solution can't address all the use cases within the organization. Mostly the kind of mix is considered basis of your threat exposure and business needs. But the key characteristics which I have seen organizations agreeing is that you should have a tightly controlled from a centralized management system perspective, where it gives you a coverage across your entire organization and plug in the security gaps that exist in respect to that. And a very important piece is that there is an automation coming in rather than the manual intervention, which has been often very prone to error. And that is something which, the data-centric solution is being designed to address on those problem areas. And with our organizations currently looking at, I'm sure Shibu and Biju will agree, there are dozens of security policies and hundreds of data types. So how do we decide that which would be right way to go forward? Because one size fits all will not be the message that would address the challenges that is being faced. So some data might require technologies like encryption, whereas other maybe need to go to tokenization or masking, or to get deleted after they have completed certain cycle of being stored in your organization. So the effective way or a strategy would be tailored to meet the unique requirements you have, while you are accommodating all these changes that are coming up with respect to the scenario or the landscape that is changing around you. And you can expand it with the respect of business need or the respect of the particular compliance aspect that also comes to strengthen the whole coverage from the breach perspective. So that would be my 2 cents to add on this.
Cool, sure. Biju, what could be a consistent data protection strategy for organizations against rising challenges of data breaches happening today?
Yeah, that's a key question. So there is nothing like one single solution or one single approach that can ensure that. So basically, even in the last question, we explained on many of the controls or many of the ways which we can ensure privacy or security of the data. So basically, when we look at that question, first of all, we have to accept the fact that, just like Ved mentioned, 100% data security is a myth. Similarly, whatever preventive measures we take, that alone itself is enough. So we have to ensure a holistic approach, which includes a combination of, at the first level, taking adequate steps to prevent attack in all best possible ways. And on top of that, having adequate monitoring and responding mechanism to detect early and respond so as to minimize the damages. So it's a combination of multiple strategies, solutions, etc. So, for example, it can start from having the right kind of solutions, ensuring the security of that solutions, ensuring patching of the servers, applications, the endpoints, then having appropriate controls like firewalls, IPS, WAF, etc. So then again, in spite of all these controls, if data gets leaked in one or other kind of way, like we had mentioned in the initial question. So if the data is encrypted, so even if it is leaked, it becomes useless provided the key management is strong. So again, there are clauses to add. So there is no one single solution to that. It's a combination of strategies which has to be increased over a period of time. There is no full stop also for that. So whatever is 100% or even 99.99% mature today, tomorrow it may be 75% only. So we'll have to continuously migrate like that. Then on top of that, 24/7 effective monitoring and responding team is very much essential.
Okay.
So a combination of all this can reasonably prevent an institution from minimizing the damages. So that is what I can say.
Sure. No, definitely great point there. Shibu sir, data becomes the most valuable commodity on the planet today, surpassing oil. As data breaches continue with regularity and compliance mandates get more stringent, organizations need to protect sensitive data, both on-prem and in cloud environments. What's the best strategy to protect the data?
Yes. Here, I think before I go forward, I have a question. How do you protect what you do not know? Now, what is the key point here is, first you should know what is your data, where is it lying, and what is happening in that. In terms of what I'm trying to say here is, you need to classify your data. That is one of the most important things which we need to do if you are pursuing a data-centric security strategy, which is good and it should be done. First, you need to classify your data, and as Ved has mentioned earlier, you need to bucket it, slot it into, the confidential, whatever way you want to classify it, confidential, public, private, whatever it is, labels you want to give it, but ensure that it is classified and take help of business for that, because business would be the right people to say what is the critical data, which data is critical and which is not critical or public, etc. The key point is, once you classify this data and identify your crown jewels, you could build your protection strategy around that, in terms of ensuring that data is encrypted in transit, in motion, or in transit, in use, or and at rest. So which would mean that, as Ved rightly mentioned earlier, it would help you to first build appropriate strategies. That's very important. You cannot simply waste time and effort and money on protecting some data which is already publicly available on your website. You don't have to worry about it. At the same time, you need to really protect your crown jewels, build multiple layers of defense around that. And one of the key factors there is encryption of this data under all possible circumstances. For example, if coming to specifically PIE data, I think they had already mentioned about vaulting, where the other is protected. And all applications which use other cannot straight away take the other number. They use specific tokens for that. It's vaulted in another vault. A specific. So even applications who process the other data cannot do it straight away. Similarly, apply such strategies so that PA data is vaulted or tokenized, such that only a masked form of data is available for regular processing, and it is available only to people who genuinely need it. Otherwise, it is encrypted. As again, it was as mentioned earlier, the keys are under control, so that your encrypted data is completely under your control. Whatever happens, it becomes useless for people who get that. In terms of PII data also, specifically, since the privacy bill is around the corner and all that, we need to ensure that extra care is taken for protecting customers' data and employees' data, personal data. And this, as I told earlier, we can use multiple strategies like vaulting, tokenize. So tokenize, for example, PCI DSS talks about card data. Card data cannot be just like that used in any application. Entire card, it has to be masked appropriately, so that, in fact, you usually would see in ATM, in the slips which you get from the ATM, a lot of access are there. Number is not exposed. And another important point which sometimes is left out is in terms of proper backup and restoration, which is to ensure that your data, whatever data is generated, is protected in terms of appropriate copies are there, so that in case, for example, to some extent, if you have a ransomware attack, you can of course restore data and escape to some extent, provided they don't. The other point I mentioned earlier about a double extortion, where they don't your data is not leaked out. Once you follow these strategies, I think you classify it, and then you apply appropriate controls around that in terms of encryption, vaulting, and restricting access to only there you apply the question, the concept of identity and access management, where only identified people have access to this data, and you keep very close monitoring and who is accessing this data for what purpose. Once you follow this, along with the robust incident response strategy, would, I think, go a long way to prevent and minimize data breaches.
Sure.
That's my opinion on this.
So, is there a solution that can ensure data protection? And can it also lower operational costs and capital expenditure while optimizing staff efficiency and productivity? Is there such a solution available?
Yes, there have been certain platforms that have really come up. Thales being one of the global leaders in providing such platform that takes care of managing the complete security of data across its life cycle, from the time it is being created to the time it is being either restored in your servers or in your databases, and then whether it is archived or deleted. And this platform offers a very integrated capability of identifying the data first, then classifying and bringing the risk to you in terms of what is the data risk for each type of data which needs to be looked upon, basis of which you will design the adequate control to mitigate those risks around that data. And that adequate control could be, again, going through the process of bringing the format preserving encryption or the tokenization or the going through the complete lifecycle management of the encryption keys, which would be very important here in these scenarios, because encryption without managing the encryption keys is an insecure way of protecting the data. And then if you're moving to cloud or you're taking a workload to cloud, how do the same set of solutions that you're implemented for on-premise addresses the data security concerns in the cloud? So this same solution would scale up in terms of bringing those security measures to empower you to take the control of data security in cloud rather than leaving it with cloud service provider, in terms of having these controls like bring your own keys or bring your own encryption that I called up some time back. So this particular platform that Thales offers is called CipherTrust Data Security Platform. And it has been recently adopted by our 2 or 3 of the large private sector banks in India and some of the major government organizations who have really been evaluated it for a long time before taking a decision to implement it to address all the future threats related to securing the data in this changing landscape.
Sure. Great. Coming back to Biju now. Biju, you spoke about having the right controls and processes in place to prevent data loss. What kind of controls can actually prevent organizations against rising ransomware attacks and insider threats, which is also increasing these days?
Yeah, so basically when we say about ransomware attacks, there are 3 key points which we have to look at. So first thing is, like we all say, for risk management, make all efforts to prevent it. So if you do an analysis of the previous ransomware attacks which has happened across many organizations, most of this has come through a simple mail as a phishing attempt. And one or other employees might have clicked it and got infected. So from a prevention perspective, the most important thing is awareness among the users, as well as reasonable controls at the email gateways, so that to the extent possible, malicious emails can be prevented from reaching the mailbox. And even if it reaches, the employees can identify the phishing mails and they stay away from clicking on that. So that is one important point which all organizations have to give priority on that. So second thing is that in the worst case scenario, if we get attacked, so how quick we can resume the business, how we can minimize the disruption. So for that, appropriate kind of backup strategy and all will certainly help to bring the business back within the minimum time. Then again, like Mr. Shibu earlier mentioned, so nowadays, the attackers have moved one step ahead. So they not only now log the data, they do the data exfiltration, and also they put it up for sale in the dark web nowadays, because in many cases attackers came across situation like the victim were not contacting them for paying the ransom and getting the keys back. So like now we also mentioned the methodologies like encryption, proper encryption of the data during at least during rest can help in acting as mitigants against that also. So even if the attackers get hold of the data, if it is properly encrypted with adequate strong keys and all, the threat posed to the organization can be minimized. So it's again a combination of strategies that can help against ransomware attacks.
Sure. Ved, what's your take on this? Do you agree with Biju? What else can CISOs do?
Absolutely with Biju on this, and I think Biju clearly has a very clear vision in terms of the required controls to address these threat areas. Definitely from my side, what I had seen would add on that currently the major concerns for organizations to look at are areas around protecting the data at rest. Then how do you secure data in motion when data is leaving out of your any premises or any of the interconnected systems that it is? And very important part, in case you are having certain controls like encryption, how are you having a centralized key management in place? Because this becomes a very, very instrumental in terms of securing the data protection approach that you are considering for your organization. Then how do you define the access control around it in terms of who is accessing or who is authorized to access these encryption keys? When is he accessing? How well are you rotating this authorization on periodic basis? And as you are also considering moving of the workload in cloud, how do you address the cloud security areas? So all these are some of the 5 concerns that also organizations need to look at when they are assessing or evaluating a data protection approach within the organization. And I think Biju absolutely is bang on all these concerns.
Great. Mr. Shibu, with the upcoming data protection bill, how do you see the security landscape changing? What impact do you think would the bill have on the security landscape?
I think as we all know, GDPR in Europe has been around for a long time. Now we have got this personal data protection bill in Parliament. Joint Parliament committee is looking into it, and this anytime due soon. And the challenges, as I mentioned earlier, there the primary focus is on protecting the personally identifiable information, PA information, and for organizations generally like us, banks specifically, BFSI sector, it would involve a combination of both customer data and employee data. That is extremely critical, and as mentioned somewhere in the bill also, the cost of non-compliance is also pretty tough. Huge fines are there. So a combination of this. All these things, because it becomes a rule, you are literally violating the rule. It's a rule, law of the land itself, when you do not follow the bill or the directions of the bill or the rules. So what do you do about it? The primary thing is, as we have been discussing quite a bit on this, protect the PA data. At the end of the day, you have to protect the data. That the only difference is this is focused on the personal data. Different varieties of data, all the financial data, health data, etc. Many such the types of data are already mentioned in the bill, and in fact it goes to the extent of sensitive or SPA, sensitive personal information. Also, I think it's mentioned elsewhere, and classifies the bill also classifies organized into 2-3 categories: significant data processor and data fiduciary, etc. Different categories are there. The key point here is whoever collects this data has got the responsibility. That is the key point. Now, as far as banks are concerned, for example, we collect the data directly from the customer in a large number of cases, and we have got a primary responsibility, even if we give the data to some other vendor for some processing purpose also, and some breach happens from him also, still we are responsible. That is the underlying point here. And so we need to ensure that we protect data with us. Not only that, in case you are handing out this data to somebody for some processing, appropriate consents have to be taken from the customer or the employee to tell. It should be conveyed to them very, very clearly that what is the purpose for this, for which this information is being collected, and it should be also conveyed to them that this can be given to third parties for processing. And you need to ensure that both your data, which is with you, in the sense data with you, and the data with the vendor, both are equally and strongly protected. It's not a question of just protecting data with you only, with the third party, in case that is also being protected equally strongly, so that both there's no provision or no option or no chance for any data leakage either from you or from your subcontractor. So that will require, as Ved mentioned rightly, and Biju also mentioned, that a set of strong controls, a real effort there, in the sense data has to be protected in all ways. If you have data with you, it has to be protected. It's as simple as that. Whether data is at rest or it is being used inside used as a part of some processing, or it is in transit, traveling over the networks, etc. Whichever way it is, it has to be protected, encrypted strongly, and ensure that keys are also protected. Now, this will involve not just you may have to relook at your the way applications handle your data. As I mentioned earlier, how do you ensure that this data is not processed openly, in the sense, I mean, in plain text, or as for example, if you take a Aadhaar number or a passport number or whatever it is, not in the form it is seen in the real world, it should be appropriately masked or protected, so that even as a person with very sufficiently high privileges in the system should not be able to view that. That is the key point here, that appropriate controls have to be built there in terms of masking, vaulting, and tokenization, whatever, I mean, whichever way you want to take, I mean, whichever approach you need to take, ensure an appropriate approach is taken, so that this is all the personal data is protected in any which way, in any which form you handle it. Moment it reaches you, protection starts, and till such time, even there is a something called the option for a customer to even request for a deletion of his data. Till such time it is removed completely from your system. That approach, there is no relaxation, no laxity can be practiced or followed. You need to ensure that very strong controls are applied on this. Absolutely no compromise there. It should be very clear.
Okay, great. With your perspective on the data bill and how it's going to impact cybersecurity and CISOs.
So absolutely, I think Shibu had covered most of the points. There will be one major area which I think will keep both Shibu and Biju to work heavily, would be in terms of defining the security policies. The way the traditional policies in the organizations have been existing, which have been primarily in terms of defining the access protocols around the devices and other controls. Now the shift will be mostly around the data, type of data that is being dealt with across the business processes, and how do we define the policies that regulate or that are enforced in securing the data, and how do the enforcement happens automatically, so that every time if there is certain incremental data that comes in your system, you don't need to manually go and intervene it, but these security policies are enforced automatically, helping you to get relief from the day-to-day manual operations that or the intensive process that you go through. So I see a big, I would say, transformation happening in terms of the way the security policies within the organizations have been shaping up, and this data privacy bill will definitely bring a lot of incremental changes in addressing to respect to these compliances, which would be very relevant for especially all these financial sensitive organizations, which are very much regulated by multiple laws that binds them to enforce these policies in place. And last, I would say definitely, I have seen even now organizations are looking to secure the data in motion aspect, right, where you are putting the confidential data from your mobile browser till the journey that it takes to go through your web server. How do we secure particularly all those data fields in the transit? And this is where we have been involved again in doing an extensive project in helping against all this possible man-in-the-middle attack, or in case of any other leakages that come in, we're offering you an secure and robust end-to-end protection by helping you to do all this mobile-based sharing of the data with your servers, keeping three important principles that confidentiality, your integrity, and availability all being addressed with all these technology stacks that we kind of work with these respective.
Sure. Great. So, gentlemen, we've had an amazing discussion, but given the time limits, we are fast approaching, closure of this session. So, one final question to all of you: before we wrap up the panel. Starting with you, Biju, what are your future plans with respect to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so that's a very tricky question. So there is nothing like this will ensure 100% protection. So cybersecurity, it's a journey. So we need to continuously have a race with attackers. We need to continuously monitor the technology tools, etc., which are available in the market. And wherever we are today, we need to ensure that we migrate to tomorrow. So that is a very quick answer that I can give. So along with that, what we have to look at is to ensure that every organization makes use of the latest technology tools which are available. Currently, when we say most organization makes use of AI as well as machine learning capabilities to dig a large amount to identify the old ones from the large amount of data. So that kind of technology-enabled tools are also very much relevant and needed for ensuring a good monitoring and incident response mechanism also.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. Final comments from you, Ved, before we wrap it up?
So I would say I see a significant change in terms of moving from a point-based technology solutions to a platform-based approach, which caters to a large use cases, which addresses the future requirements as well, which are coming up, so that you don't go and reinvest back into these specific single-purpose use cases, rather than you have a solution that addresses the larger set of use cases that help you to meet and enable you with the capability of addressing the data across multiple environments, be it your big data, be it your cloud, be it your virtualized environment. So this would be really a key area to invest in. And this is where I see a tremendous interest building up in terms of exploring this kind of technology for addressing the newer landscape changes that we foresee with these emerging bills and laws that will be coming up in this sector.
Sure. Great. That's all we have time for, gentlemen. To sum up today's discussion, understanding today's threat landscape is critical to developing strategies and solutions to establish a strong cybersecurity framework. It is critical for both organizations and individuals to not become complacent and remain vigilant, regularly defending their threat landscape. While there are multiple threats today for home and businesses, we must develop strategies to better protect ourselves from these threats while identifying future ones. It is time to stay vigilant. With this, we bring this session to a close. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your knowledge. And thank you, viewers, for watching us. Everybody stay safe, stay home, and stay healthy. Thank you.